Hey goblins, welcome back to the only podcast with its own search tags on those websites. This is Super Despair World, the real happiest place on Earth. And today we're talking about something, actually first let's do a bit of spring cleaning first. I want to say, we've been doing this show for a while now. What has it been like a week?
It's been a week. A very long week.
Yeah, it has been a week, and I've been thinking, just before we started recording, I was like, the show isn't the same anymore. This isn't the Super Despair World I grew up with. It's like something's just not there.
No, I don't really enjoy it anymore, honestly.
Yeah, I think back to those wonderful times when I was like a week younger than I am now, and it was like, there was a different energy about it. That first episode, it just hit different, and it just hasn't really been the same since.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it us? Is it me? Is it just the world? Like, I just can't really enjoy anything anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this show was better before it went woke. I feel like it used to be made with love, and now it's just like a product being sold to us by like people that invaded the Super Despair World fandom, and they don't get it.
It's pretty much just ad reads now.
Yeah, I know. Like, comment, and subscribe if that makes you feel a certain way. But to be serious, today we're talking about how things used to be, and specifically, we're gonna get into the big media giant of our time. We're talking Disney and people who like Disney.
Disney adults.
Disney adults. It's funny to me that this has become its own term. We don't talk about other things like, oh, there are video game adults, or there are like Scorsese movie adults or something, but there's this like group of people on the internet who we've come to like recognize. It's like a very specific type of like millennial who's really into their childhood, and they still get super emotional when they see somebody like prance around in like a big goofy costume or something. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Have you ever been to Disney World?
I can't say I have. And you know what? Given how queer I am, it's probably best that I haven't ever been to America in general.
Oh yeah. Well, there are some in other places. You could go to Disney World in Chiba, Japan.
Is it better out there? Have you been?
No, I haven't been. I haven't been here either. I had the chance to go one time. An ex-girlfriend of mine, her uncle worked there, and he gave us free tickets, and we were about to go, and yeah, I don't know, like the vibes were weird at the time, and we kind of like started driving there, and she was like, do you want to go here? And I was like, not really. And she was like, me either. And then we just turned around and went to like an alligator park and looked at gators, which was probably cooler. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I kind of regret it in the sense of like, it probably would have been a good experience even if I didn't like it, to just see what all the fuss is about. But yeah, I cannot say I've actually been there before.
It sounds to me like maybe her third eye opened, and for a brief second she had some clarity and saw the fucking Disney World secret police like trailing you guys on the highway to make sure you go there and don't disrupt the peace.
It's possible. Or she saw a future where we got married and turned into Disney adults and just had like goofy hats on, and that was all we did with our lives, is just work 11 months out of the year so we could go to Orlando for one and just really vibe out in line for 45 minutes to go to the Back to the Future ride or some shit like that.
Well, I'll tell you, any hat that you buy in Orlando is a goofy hat to me.
Hey, got him.
Hey. Yeah, but let's talk about the Disney Corporation in general, because I feel like there's something uniquely like sinister and kind of all-encompassing about what Disney is as like just a force in the world. Like the way that they own more IPs than basically God at this point, and it feels like all good things that we come to love and enjoy in popular culture is now like just the property of one company, and that's really weird.
It is a little weird too. I mean, looking back, for all my fellow boomers out there, To think that Star Wars would be part of Disney at some point, and I'm not saying Star Wars is some pure IP. I mean, George Lucas was thinking about selling Ewok figures before the original trilogy was even over, but to think that it's now under one umbrella IP on some centralized streaming service is it's a little weird.
People give George Lucas a lot of shit, but I think there's something very genuine and something that I would consider real art by knowing that the music played in the cantina is known as jizz. I feel like we've lost that in the Disney acquisition.
Yeah, he was a true genius as far as music goes. I mean, you could say anything about film and anything like that, but if we're talking jizz, George Lucas, he was the king of jizz.
We love some jizz on this show. We should record our own like jizz intro for every episode.
Let's get a jizz band together.
That sounds great. Let's forget about podcasting. Let's get into jizz.
see, in the future, we'll take the intro song, which is a work in progress, guys. If there's not an intro song on this one, it's gonna be fucking amazing. You can't rush genius. I'm working on it. Don't worry about it. But in the future, we're gonna have so many variations on this. And when we do the Disney Adult Reboot episode for our 500th, we'll get a real jizz band on there, and they'll be jizzing all over the place. And you could be a part of that too.
Yeah, we're gonna hit you with the Super Despair World theme Nightcore jizz remix.
Yeah, any jizz artists, just start commenting now, because if you get in on the ground floor, you could be the original jizzer.
Would you believe me if I told you I've never seen any of the Star Wars movies?
Any of them.
Yeah, I'll check it out at some point. But yeah, Star Wars. That's part of Disney now too.
You were never exposed to them.
Yeah, I guess I guess the opportunity just never came up. I mean, I might have seen them as a kid, but it probably was before I formed memories.
I mean, that's fair. I feel no. I don't know. Like, I think my first exposure to them was my dad taped them on the VHS player, like off the TV, and I was watching them. I was watching them like on whatever network was playing them, and he would like fast forward through the commercials. It was truly ahead of our time. Or wait, no, that doesn't work. I would fast forward through the commercials, and I really felt like I was cheating the system there.
Yeah, but it's harder and harder to cheat the system nowadays because, like we said, Disney basically owns everything. Everything that you might love as a kid, it's probably owned by Disney now. Like, I wasn't quite paying attention to when they bought Star Wars, but I do remember when they bought Marvel, and that seemed like an insane acquisition to me at the time. Like, oh, they just own like half of all Western comics now.
Yeah, and that is like a big thing. What was? Do you remember the first movie you ever saw in theaters?
I don't know if it was the first one for sure, but the first one I remember, I was like 6 years old. I was watching the Digimon movie when that came out here, and it was fucking rad.
Okay, so as a quick aside, my friend just texted me, and she said, she was like, "Do you remember Digimon? Or are you like too old or young or whatever to remember that?"
Oh,
and
I'm like a big Digimon head. It was like the first like hyper fixation I had when I was a kid.
Oh, I totally remember Digimon, and apparently there's a new movie coming out.
There might be. I mean, that franchise is still chugging along, just like in the background of our lives.
All right. That's
one of the few things not owned by Disney.
Yeah, I guess so. Or it's direct competitor Nintendo with the Pokemon franchise. But anyways, the reason I brought that up was the first one I ever saw was The Little Mermaid.
Oh yeah, I definitely saw that when I was I think I watched that in school at some point. I definitely watched most of my like classic Disney movies when I was a little kid going to elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm aging myself with that one. I was very young. This is one of my formative memories. I remember my uncle took me and my sister. We got Raisinets and we watched The Little Mermaid. That's all I remember. Can't really tell you more than that. Did I enjoy the movie? Who knows? I was barely sentient at that point.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, there isn't really like a high standard. Like, you don't really like like or dislike things. I feel you mostly just like consume things, and some things make the neurons in your brain fire, and other things just don't.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I guess the point is that like this Disney movie was a formative experience for me. It was a part of my childhood.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably true for like at least the vast majority of people, at least in America, probably much of the world too, right? It feels like if you're growing up, it's probably hard to escape the reach of Disney. There's gonna be something you're exposed to made by Disney, and you're gonna be like obsessed with it. And it feels like there's really no getting around that, especially nowadays.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, that was, I think, the beginning of the golden age of Disney, which they call it, like the Lion King, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, etc.
Yeah, kind of like the what is that, like late 80s, 90s, that
yeah,
period.
yeah, I think it was like the early to mid 90s ish, that type of thing. But I mean, even before that, like I'm sure our parents grew up watching like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Goofy and shit. Like I definitely remember seeing them on TV. I probably had a VHS or two. Yeah, so like we all of us alive now, we remember Disney shit. It was a part of our lives.
Actually, my first Disney memories are some of the old like 1950s, like 60s cartoons, because we just had a lot of VHS tapes.
The really
for those.
racist ones.
Well, I don't know if they were that racist. I don't know. I would have to rewatch them. The one that I remember the most was it was called The Three Caballeros. It was like a Donald Duck movie with like these two other birds, and they were on like in like Mexico or something.
So it was definitely racist.
And that yeah,
there
yeah,
had to be some racist shit going on.
I solved my own. I answered my own question there. But the thing I remember most about that movie was like at least it felt like a 10 or 20 minute long like fucking LSD trip sequence, full with a musical score in the middle. I know they had that in Dumbo too, which that was definitely a very racist movie as well.
I do. With speaking of that, I remember that like Mickey Mouse Fantasia one. Have you ever seen that?
Let me look that up really quick. I want to say probably not.
If I barely remember it. It was like a weird thing starring Mickey, and he was like a wizard, and it was like a bunch of music.
I see
and
Mickey
all that
the Wizard.
I thought.
I'll be honest, I thought this was just like some Kingdom Hearts bullshit for a long time.
I mean, it was definitely trippy. And there was another one that me and my sister used to watch all the time. We also had it on VHS. And it was something about like it was like Donald Duck, and they talked about like Pythagoras and like all of this like crazy like science shit. And it was super cool. I don't even remember. I don't know if that was a part of Fantasia, if that was a different thing, but yeah, I mean, like, Disney did a lot of shit, and a lot of it was cool. We can't really deny that.
As quote unquote problematic as a lot of those old Disney movies were, I kind of respect it, because you can tell at some point in the movie the animators were like, let's just get really weird with it for like the next 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and,
for
like,
sure.
Instill some childhood nightmares in people.
And I mean, I guess that's the cool part about it, is they let these dudes kind of go crazy and experiment with a lot of shit, which we don't. Is there that? Well, not in studios, but with independent artists, sure. But we don't really see that in studios anymore. They're kind of playing it safe. So what I'm saying is, things just aren't like they were before.
It's just not the Disney I grew up with, man.
It's just not the same, right?
I was looking this up just before the show. Fun little factoid to start us off here. Do you know that Disney was founded like 100 years and 1 month ago? It was October 16th in 1923.
Oh,
so
shit.
It's been a full century as of the time of recording.
Fucking A. But Steamboat Willie's still not in the public domain.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the long story of Disney, right? How they kind of built their entire company off of the public domain, like stuff that was just considered, like folklore and culture to so many people.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we own this now, and they still own it to this day.
Yeah. Snow White, wasn't that one of their first, if not their first, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like Snow White, Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
I think The Beauty and the Beast was probably something like
I
that
think it
too.
was
I
a
think that was like a
Grimm's. I think it was
novel.
a Grimm's fairy tale.
I'm pretty sure it was too. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
but they stole it.
Yeah, they've been doing this like that was a lot of the early Disney years, how they kind of built their back off things in the public domain, and then we had like that like 1950s 1960s period, a lot of those old questionably racist or undeniably racist movies that I grew up with. And those were kind of fun. Like they had some creative merits to it. They got weird with it. They got a little experimental. And you know what? Disney did actually like really fund the arts for a long
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
And then that kind of brought us to like the quote unquote golden age, the 90s, which is kind of that time period where like 2D animation was getting really good, but this was like
Really
right
good.
before people realized, oh, 3D animators aren't unionized, so let's move to that.
And let's not forget how banging the music in the in for those films were in the golden age of Disney were Alan Menken. He did a lot of the music. Tim Rice did a lot of the lyrics. Some absolutely memorable shit there. Say what you want about the movies. Although they were good. Like don't say what you want. Like they were good. So don't be an asshole. But the songs, like there's a lot of really good tracks on there.
Yeah, for sure. Don't ask me to name any music specifically, but I remember, I think my favorite Disney movie from back then was the ill-fated Treasure Planet movie, which I think was fucking amazing, but it did not do well.
Anyone who has not seen Treasure Planet, do yourself a favor. I actually, when I was a teacher, I used to show my students this movie because none of them have ever seen it before. And this was like the end of the 2D era for Disney. And it was this really cool intersection between 2D animation and there was a lot of like 3D stuff, but it wasn't like when you watch Aladdin there's like a 3D scene and it was definitely done on a computer that probably cost like $300,000 and it looks like absolute dog shit and there's no fucking reason for it to be in there other than like we're doing 3D animation. This is amazing.
Yeah, and that computer would take like 6 months to render
absolutely.
like 50 megabytes of animation.
Absolutely.
Or something.
And like nobody knew how to use it at the time. That must have been so frustrating to do 3D animation back then.
Yeah, Treasure Planet, that was 2002, so that was definitely right around the tail end of the golden age before Disney ended up being not the Disney we grew up with. Mm-hmm. It's before it went bad, before they went woke and
my other deep cut favorite before we move on is Road to El Dorado. This one gets a lot of hate for some reason. I don't know why. That movie fucking rules, man. I'm sorry. Road to El Dorado, that belongs up there with the classics. If you disagree, get fucked. Find me on Twitter. I'll check my account eventually, and at me.
Yeah, that was a really good movie too, and I think it has some staying power too. Like you still see fucking memes and shit posts related to that movie nowadays, and it was really charming.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some complaints people could raise against it, but that's another classic for me. I need to rewatch that sometime.
Absolutely. I think Elton John did the soundtrack to that.
Elton John, holy shit!
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's kind of that takes us to where we are nowadays. How it's kind of you can't blame anybody for not loving Disney as a kid, right? Like everybody saw Disney movies.
It was good,
and a lot of them are amazing. Good. Even the weird racist ones, they had some fun like fucking LSD like trip sequences in the middle there. Just like it's fun animation. It was groundbreaking. There's a lot to learn if you're into art and animating and stuff. You gotta study those old movies, but there's something kind of different about it nowadays when we talk about Disney adults, because it's not just like you and I just like fucking nerded out about how we like some of those old movies for like a good 20 minutes or something. But you and I, we're not Disney adults. Disney adults are like, it's something else. There's something kind of like wrong and maybe even like perverse about the term, the way we use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what is a Disney adult? Let's suss that out real quick. What qualifies one as a Disney adult? Because we like, just as you said, we like Disney shit. We like old Disney shit. I probably like a lot of new Disney shit. Who knows? But I wouldn't consider myself a Disney adult. I wouldn't consider you a Disney adult. So what makes a Disney adult?
So for me, when I think of the term Disney adult, I have to think about it in terms of like it's an identity thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who like really identify with liking Disney, like they make it part of their personality. They don't just own a little bit of merch, they own a lot of merch. Maybe like making regular trips to Disneyland or Disney World is like a part of their yearly schedule. They save up money for it, or maybe they can just afford it because, you know, a lot of these people are pretty well-to-do upper middle class white people,
Right,
and
right,
whatever.
right.
I think of like parents who are like, I have to show my kids these classic movies. I have to instill this in them. It's like, it's kind of like a cultural thing, you know? It's not just a fandom. It goes beyond that, because what Disney is, it's not just like a popular culture thing. Like, it is culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you're saying it's grooming children plus consumerism.
Whoa. Okay. Well, that's okay. We're coming out swinging here tonight, but you know, it's like I said, a lot of the stuff that Disney built their company on the back of was like, okay, these are like folk tales and like things in the public domain, things that are kind of owned by everyone collectively, and now they've like taken that and commodified it, and now it feels like what is a modern American like folklore outside of like popular culture and buying merch, right?
Well,
is there
yeah,
anything?
no, that is a good point.
Is maybe it's like hunting Bigfoot or some shit. I don't know how commodified that is.
I mean, but Bigfoot's been probably around for well before. Bigfoot's and other cryptids, they've probably been around since the days of the tales of the Grimm's fairy tales and shit like that, right?
Well, I'm pretty sure Bigfoot just exists and has been here since like time immemorial, but that's another.
I've seen him personally. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't. But if anybody has, we'd like to have you on the pod.
Send us your Bigfoot fan art, especially the spicy kind.
Yeah, any cryptid hunter, we would totally like to have you on. We want to hear all about it.
By the end of this year, we want to be the #1 podcast for monster fuckers everywhere.
Monster fuckers, monster hunters, just monster people in general. Any bad dragon
people who hunt monsters to fuck them.
Yeah, any bad dragon enthusiasts, we'll get you on. We got a lot to talk about.
Right. But let's get back to the other kind of perverse, which is buying more merchandise than God.
Yeah, merchandise.
Yeah. So talking about Disney adults, like sometimes we like to watch videos, like let's go on TikTok and see like, oh, this awkward person like proposed to their wife at Disney World or something,
Mm-hmm.
or like someone who is like in their 30s approached the teacup ride and saw like one of the Disney princesses in costume and like got all teary-eyed, and it's like that's kind of weird, right? I don't know.
It is a little weird. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, it was a part of our lives, but when you look at it through the lens of like, this was always a commodity of some sort, it does become slightly perverse.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's not cool, it's wrong if you are into like quote unquote childish things as an adult, you know? Like I haven't consumed any Digimon media in like quite a few years, but if I was to go online now and I look up some of those like old monster designs that I really liked as a kid, I would still go, hey, that's pretty fucking cool. This thing is like just a weird like thumb person that wrestles people and is like and has a gun or something. I don't know. That's cool. It's not weird to still be into the stuff that you were into as a kid.
I'm literally looking at a Kirby little figure that I got in Japan that's sitting on top of my computer right now. So I can't be like I'm not gonna do the like 4chan consumer meme and like shit on somebody for like liking for liking some sort of media or movie or video game or franchise or something like that. Like they're not, they are art. In some way, shape, or form, some more than others, but there's let's first say that there's nothing wrong with liking shit that you like, unless it's
We're all a little Reddit. We've all looked at like maybe a Funko Pop. Okay, nobody actually.
no.
likes Funko Pops,
That
but
that I'll push back on. If you like Funko Pops, fucking grow up.
Okay, that's like the one exception. Okay, but you know, I've considered buying some like cringy like anime figurines. I've seen some cool ones. I wanted to get like a little 8-inch tall like wife for my desk. But, you know, I haven't
We've
yet.
all thought about doing a cum tribute before.
Well, you know that's for another episode. You know what? If you want us to talk about anime figurines, like the show, and we'll set aside a budget for it.
Yeah.
And I'm totally not just asking for money to buy some of those.
Yeah, we'll do that for the Gooner episode.
Yeah, that's when we'll bust out the Nightcore Jizz remix.
Yeah, we're slowly collecting a Gooner panel for a Q&A. Anybody interested, you know, DMs are open. You know, we'll talk. This is down the road, but we can.
Yeah, a specially assembled council to think long and hard about it.
Yeah, you need
yeah,
at least 6 screens of Goon content to qualify, but yeah.
Remember to open this show in 6 different tabs to give us 6 times as many views. That's how it works.
There you go.
I don't think it actually works like that. But getting back on track, we're talking about it's not weird to still like the things you liked as a kid, but when I think of Disney adults and how they do it, it's like there's kind of this performative element to it, right? When I see someone who is like a grown-ass tax-paying adult and they go to Disney World and they're like holding back tears of joy for like a TikTok video because they saw like Mickey Mouse prancing around in the costume, probably some like underpaid 20-year-old like sweating to death under there. It's like, okay, you didn't actually like it that much as a kid, right? There's something going on there where it's like this has turned into something else in your head that it wasn't originally. And it's like there's something kind of wrong. Like there's something kind of uncanny about the nostalgia that like drives someone to react that way and consume Disney stuff in the way that we think of as like Disney adults.
Fuck, man, I wish I liked anything that much.
Oh, that's how I felt about any like fandom thing in general. Even stuff I like I play a lot of Final Fantasy 14, but then I go on Twitter and I see people making like the most bizarre, like, here's all the characters who died. I drew them as like quirky millennials sharing a room together. And I'm like, no.
So like the Undertale fandom.
Oh, Undertale is probably the worst example of this. There was a video. It was just titled "What the Internet Did to Undertale." I think that was Super Eye Patch Wolf, and that's a biting title.
Oh, I might have watched that, but when you're talking about that, it reminded me of I don't remember what like games event I don't know if it was a Nintendo one or something else, but they showed like they had the original. Before Earthbound, which is Mother 2 in Japan, Earthbound, which is the one before it for Nintendo, and they said they were going to put that on the whatever it is on Switch, the virtual console store or whatever the fuck it's called. And there were like grown ass men just like weeping openly while watching the trailer for this. And like, I fucking love Earthbound, man. I grew up with that shit. I still love it today. That is a fucking fantastic game. It's a fantastic series, but like, I can't have that kind of reaction to anything. That's just media, I guess. Maybe I'm insane. Maybe they're maybe they're saying and I'm not, but it was a little strange.
I've had my own doubts about that too. I'm like, am I just like dead inside?
Exactly.
Am I just incapable of enjoying things the way other people do?
Right.
I think back to like my favorite pieces of media that I've ever consumed, and I just think back on them and I think, yeah, that was pretty cool. I liked
Yeah,
that. Well,
right.
maybe I'll check that out again.
Right,
you
right,
know?
right.
Like the furthest I'll go is maybe I'll talk to someone else in my DMs and we'll just nerd out about it for like 30 minutes or something. But yeah, fandom is like, it's largely something that's beyond me. I don't quite understand it, but maybe by the end of this episode we can come to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there's the performative element of Disney adults, right? They enjoy things in a way that I don't think is, if I'm being honest, I don't think it's entirely sincere. I think there's something that drives people to act in this way, and it's like the way that they look at their favorite pieces of media now. It's like it's definitely colored by like something going on in the present, right? It wasn't actually that good when you look back on it, but it's like, I want to go back to this time when life was simple and I was just a kid and I could just consume all these things. And am I on the right track here?
Yeah, we're talking about nostalgia.
Yeah, nostalgia. If you ask me, I really feel like nostalgia is like, it's got to be some kind of like brain worm, right? Like it's not. I think it's inevitable that everybody feels nostalgic for something at some point, but I don't think it leads to a good place. And if I was to break down what it means to be a Disney adult as an identity, I think there has to be some element of like unhealthy nostalgia, like your memories of this different time in your life have been subsumed by these like products, right? Like there's
Right.
cool stuff about being a kid, but like none of that is just like, oh, I owned this very specific piece of plastic, or oh, I watched this movie. It was like, there's something genuine about enjoying media and culture and all that stuff with other people, and I feel like some element of that is just like lost when you break it down to like, yeah, the stuff I liked was better as a kid because I bought all the video games and I owned all the toys, and it's like there's something very strange and off-putting about that to me.
Well, I think it is pretty well established in psychology that our brains don't really remember things as they were. And I think it comes in two flavors where people tend to either overemphasize the good about the past or overemphasize the bad about the past, or just basically misremember shit in general. But yeah, I think nostalgia is our minds generally inventing a past that never truly existed. And you really pick and choose very tiny slivers of enjoyment. And people do tend to think like, hey, things were better back then. And there's a lot of romanticization of certain time periods. I mean, we could see that with all the insane people online now. There's the trad cons that obsess over the 1950s. There's the people who obsess over the 60s, the 70s, 80s, the lay wrong generation Reddit kids. Everybody thinks the 90s were some idyllic time where nothing went wrong before 9/11. I've even seen people on TikTok who like think about like 2005 as some perfect time that we need to go back to. I was alive then. I was like 19 years old. 2005 fucking sucked. All of these times suck.
I can kind of understand being nostalgic for other decades, but it really feels like, I don't know, like the 21st century is not really its own thing. It kind of just feels like we're just playing the hits on loop. We're just doing our favorite flashbacks to past time periods that were like more interesting than the present.
Well, that is the weird thing too. Is I can definitely like tell. I mean, this is me looking back. I was born in the late '80s, so like I don't really remember a lot of time periods. But like you can kind of see just looking at media and in photographs and history and shit like that. The 50s were kind of distinct from the 60s, which were distinct from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and they kind of had their own thing. But like I feel like since 2000, like I don't know, like I don't really I don't really like differentiate any of those periods. Like the early 2000s, like some things were different. Like the internet was kind of different. It was also kind of the same, but like I don't think like culturally there were like these like huge trends there. I feel like everything's kind of just amalgamating into like a heap of shit right now.
You think everything is just like just gotten kind of more bland the last 20 or so years?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think on one hand I'm inclined to sort of agree, but maybe I'm going to offer a little bit of pushback to that, because I think definitely there's an element of this too, which is the internet has kind of like divided everybody, right? Like there have definitely been some interesting cultural movements. Like we're going to look at so many different subcultures on this show that like got their start on the internet. But I think prior to everyone being online, there was a bit more of like a commonly understood like popular culture, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
when a show made it onto TV, it's like, okay, everybody with a TV is going to watch the same thing.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
And maybe that's an element of the Disney thing, but we're talking about nostalgia in general, and I think there's, just like we defined Disney adults to the best of our ability, let's talk about nostalgia. What does that mean to you?
Well, nostalgia to me is the idea of longing for a time that is past that you can no longer go back to. Probably a better time, but it's something that is gone and you long for.
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to be the big nerd here and reveal that I actually looked this up before the episode started to give a proper definition, which is, in the past, nostalgia was first used to describe this feeling that I think it was like ancient Roman soldiers or some sort of medieval knights or something felt when they would go out to war for a long time, and that feeling that coming home has this like uncanny vibe to them where everything is the same but like not quite as they remember it, and the feeling is just off.
Interesting.
And
that's interesting.
yeah, so the classical sense of nostalgia is this feeling about coming home. It's coming back to something very familiar, but it's uncanny and different. But the thing is, that's not like exactly how we talk about it nowadays, is it, right? Because when we talk about nostalgia for like old Disney stuff, it feels like all of it has been like subsumed by consuming products and commodities.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that I nerded out a little bit, and I looked up an adjacent term, which I'm into a lot of Brazilian music, and they always use the term saudade. And saudade is like it's similar to nostalgia, but it's a little bit different. But I think there is something we can look at there. And I actually have an NPR article that and I'll read a little excerpt there that says, perhaps my favorite of these elusive words is saudade, a Portuguese and Galician term that is a common fixture in the literature and music of Brazil, Portugal, Cape Verde, and beyond. The concept has many definitions, including a melancholy nostalgia for something that perhaps has not even happened. It often carries an assurance that this thing you feel nostalgic for will never happen again. My favorite definition of saudade is by Portuguese writer Manuel de Melo, a pleasure you suffer, an ailment you enjoy. So basically, the reason I thought that one was interesting is they kind of acknowledge that saudade, just like possibly nostalgia, is something that you long for, that may be in the past, maybe in the future, whatever, but it may have never happened in the first place. So it kind of echoes to me like a romanticization of the past that may never have actually been a thing in general. And I think when people talk about nostalgia, it's just like, oh man, I wish I could go back to the old days. But it's like, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to go back to the old days that you invented in your head.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that we're definitely touching on something I would say is close to the truth here. I think this is close to the core of what it means, because there's this element of that all this stuff like exists in your head. When you're like a little kid, you don't like jump up and down on the playground thinking, ah, yes, these are the old days that I'm going to remember. Like your idea of what the old days were, that's something that's completely colored by however you feel about the world and the past right now. It never actually existed. So I wanted to also touch on this. There's this element that I also think is important here, which is like, it seems like all nostalgia nowadays is kind of tied to like a certain feeling of melancholy, right? It's like not only, oh, was the past good, but it's like, oh, the present kind of sucks.
Oh yeah. And I think that's kind of an essential part of nostalgia in general, is this melancholy of just like, those were the days. And I see this with a lot of people who are like my age and have kind of like, you know, they've moved on and they have kids and they've gotten married and shit, and they have this weird romanticization of the past, and it's just like, yeah, dude, we had fun, but like, number one, it probably wasn't as fun as you remember, and number two, like, your life is not over. You can still do stuff. You do know that, right?
The life is not over, but when we talk about this, it definitely feels like it is, right? Because it's not just, oh, I feel kind of sad about how things seemed better in the past. It's like, oh, the past is over and it's never coming back. Things will never be good again. And I think this particular kind of nostalgia, it really blinds people to like enjoying things in the present. You're kind of like mourning the loss of all good things before you've like actually even lost them.
Exactly. Which is why I think this kind of nostalgic romanticization of the past is kind of toxic, because you're so obsessed with a time past that may never have existed again in the first place, that you refuse to live in the present moment.
Yeah, for sure. I know I've definitely showed this to you before in private. We didn't really talk about it prior to the episode, but there's this artist on the internet, and I want to be clear, I don't like talking shit to other artists, but I also zoomed in on this guy's work, and it's just like cheap photo manipulation stuff on Photoshop. You already know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys, if you browse Reddit, one, I'm sorry, and two, you've probably seen this guy's work at some point. This guy's name is Rashid Lotf, Lotf. I don't know how to say that. He does these I guess paintings. I thought they were paintings at first, but he does these little like collages almost, where it's like, oh, here's a picture of a kid in their room and they're dressed up like it's the 90s and they're surrounded by like video games and like Chuck E. Cheese pizza, and like the walls are full of like 90s posters. And it's like, it's just a collage of like, look at all these products from this time, and it's so bright and it's colorful, and honestly it kind of makes me sick, and I hate it, because like, this isn't anybody's actual childhood, right?
No, and that's the thing. Like, I grew up with a Nintendo. We had a Super Nintendo, stuff like, and like, you know, I would play video games with my sister. I would watch her play games. I would play games, like, hang out. Like, I had Nintendo Power and stuff like that. And like, it was a cool pastime as a kid, and like, it was a part of my childhood. But like, I don't look back at those times and just say like, that's when life was pure, and everything since then has been fucked. And but like, you read the comments to that shit and it's just like, dude, like, get fucking therapy, man. Like, I
there'll be like a Reddit comment being like, I'm 52 years old and I remember those were the days. They don't make them like this anymore.
Yeah. Although that's the other thing, like, they actually do, except instead of like going to what, I don't even know what fucking like Kmart or something, like, where did they sell video games back then? Instead of going there and paying $70,
like Target or Walmart or something.
Instead of doing that and like spending $70 for a licensed Nintendo video game, you go on Steam and pay $6 for a fucking dope ass indie retro game that will that you can play for a ton of time and have a really great time with. So like, that's another. So it's what I'm saying with that is it's not the content. It's not like they don't make them like they used to. They're still making Mario games, which are just updated. I mean, Mario
Not only
Wonder.
do they still make
Yeah.
them like they used to, they probably make them
Oh
better
yeah,
in a
yeah,
lot of
yeah. I
instances.
mean, Mario Wonder came back, and it's not like if Mario Wonder was like a battle royale like loot box game, I would say like, all right, maybe you have a point. But it's a fucking Mario game as far as I've seen. Like it looks fun and shit. I don't have a Switch, but yeah, like so it's what I'm saying is it's not about the content. So what is it about?
Yeah, I think there's an element of toxicity in there, right? Because I think, like we said, people who get really deep down the nostalgia rabbit hole, these aren't happy people, and when they go to Disney World, they're not the happiest people on earth.
Oh yeah.
I think there's this point where you have to realize, like, okay, at some points you can indulge your nostalgia a little bit. You can like dust off the old console or maybe like boot up an emulator because you sold it like 15 years ago, and you can enjoy some of those old games. And like, I feel like if you give in too much to nostalgia, the end result is like it's always going to be disappointing, right? It's never going to make you happy. It's just going to make you more nostalgic.
Well, that's the thing too, is when you boot up the emulator, when you pull the Super Nintendo out of storage, you have to play those games and you have to look at them as a product of their time. You can't look at them just in a purely objective basis from you right now, because I mean, if you're looking at like the grand scope of media right now, there's so much other stuff that's going on. I mean, like if they released Super Mario Brothers now, do you think in nobody has ever heard of Mario before, do you think people would be like, wow, this is a masterpiece? No, it was a masterpiece in its time, and Mario has changed and evolved over time, as things do, which is totally cool and totally fine. But so like, again, it's not about the content, it's about people's mindset and their romanticization of a past that may have existed, probably really didn't. So yeah, again, nostalgia. It's kind of brain rot, right?
Yeah, and not only have things changed over time. Like, I think one of the reasons people praise the Mario series so much is because you can still go back and play the original Mario, and like it still feels decent, right?
Oh yeah.
But everyone exists in this passage of time, and sometimes the consequence of that is like, oh yeah, stuff feels like shit now because I've experienced things better. Like everyone who's into video games has a cutoff where like, I want to like this game, but it's just too janky for me to get into.
Yep.
Like I believe people when they say that Morrowind is an excellent game, but I can't play it. It's just too janky.
Oh no.
For me. I know that's gonna piss people off, but it's true.
So that's exactly the thing. Is like I didn't play. I've played PC games for a long time, but I never got into Skyrim or anything like that. And then I see the memes online. I've looked at the gameplay because I was curious as to what people are memeing about, and I was like, this game looks like shit. Like I don't want to play this game. Like this doesn't look appealing to me at all. And I know a lot of people like love that game. They play it with mods and shit, like, and they have a good time. But like for me, who has never played it before, this is a fucking terrible game. Like, I'm sorry, guys. It objectively is. It's jank as fuck. God, I might get crucified for this one. But
you know, I used to really like Skyrim until I took an arrow to the knee.
Yeah. There you go. That's why I looked up the shit. But but that's the thing. The memes are about like how janky and stupid it was. But people grew up playing these games. It's the same with like Halo and shit like that. I have no affinity for Halo. I never had an Xbox. Never played it with anybody.
Oh man, when I didn't play the first one, but I was one of the original like angry like vulgar kids on Xbox Live playing Halo 2.
Nice. See, I was I played a lot of like Quake 2 and Half-Life. So I understand the Half-Life memes with like Gordon Freeman. And
For me, Xbox Live, like that was the start of the hate and the malice, like the disdain that just kind of like accumulated over time, and now I'm a podcaster, so I guess it kind of worked
makes
out.
sense. I wonder what turned me into a podcast. What turned me into the dark side? We'll have to think about that.
Yeah, that's the dark heart of online gaming that we all have to wrestle with at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were going off about this, about how the passage of time kind of makes these things different, right? It's not just that every time you try to indulge your nostalgia, you just feel a little more nostalgic, and I think that's kind of the start of this like unhealthy, toxic loop, right?
Yeah.
Because I think when we look now, this is not just I don't know if Disney adults get this bad, but I think the real like manifestation of this is when you look at all the people who have made a career online nowadays being quote unquote gamers, and they're like, oh, they're upset. Oh, game companies are out of touch. They don't get it. Oh, I just want games like they used to before they were full of politics and before they were catering to these fake fans. And it's like, oh, that's the worst instance of nostalgia, I feel like.
Yeah, well, that kind of ties into the idea of reboots. Where everybody bitches about reboots and stuff like that. I certainly do, but I think my bitching about reboots is a little bit different than the than the average gamer or MCU consumer. Whereas my issue with these is just like I don't make something new. Like, I don't care about this. This is boring. This is stupid. And maybe I don't know what their issue is with it. Maybe it's because there's like a minority in there or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent most of this episode talking about like the fan side of things, like individual people and how they consume these products. But at the same time, I feel like there's an element of nostalgia where it kind of prevents new things from growing and flourishing, right?
Oh yeah, for
we
sure.
We feel like the current century hasn't started because everyone's too obsessed with trying to play it safe, trying to re-release old stuff. We're trying to play the hits, and it's like I'm tired of it. Like you don't get new franchises and like films or movies that often now. Everything's like a fucking little Marvel Cinematic Universe thing. It's like another Star Wars movie. We needed more. We needed to find out the origin story of like Glub Shido on the Millennium Falcon.
Wait, what happened to Glub Shido? Did you see what happened to Glub Shido? I didn't read the spoiler.
The only thing I know about Glub Shido is the Funko Pop, but which I will never own.
Oh, I pre-ordered it. Like I can't lie. It'll be worth a lot someday. It'll be worth a lot. I feel like that.
Yeah, is it though? See, like when I think back to things that were very popular in my time as a kid, like I think back to the Beanie Baby craze, and I'm like. Yeah. Or like what I was into Yu-Gi-Oh cards when those first came out. I played a lot of that on the playground at school, and I was like, okay, do I actually like these things, or am I just into it because it's like, oh, this is like a future investment that might be worth something at some point.
I did have some rare Pogs at one point, so I don't know where they are now.
Pogs have always been cool. I like Pogs. I think.
Yeah, let's bring back fucking Pogs. All right, we'll get some Super Despair World.
All right, settle down, Millhouse.
No, we're gonna get some Super Despair World Pog sets out now. Check the merch shop. We don't have a merch shop, but someday we're gonna get the Pogs out there.
Oh, I think we could put together some incredible Pogs. Let's unironically look into
that. without question. Let us know if you're into Pogs. We got you.
Yeah, thinking about these things, it's like, okay, see, when I was a kid, I owned a lot of these things. I owned Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I owned some Beanie Babies. I probably owned some Furbies. God, those are so cursed.
Oh yeah.
And to get a little personal here, I don't have any of this stuff anymore because like a couple years ago, I lost all of it in like a fucking house fire. So most of the shit I had as a kid, like old toys and consoles and shit, it's just gone. And there was a time in my life where I was like, and by a time in my life, I mean like a few years ago, but I was like, God, I really miss this stuff. I feel so sad. Like, oh, my childhood is gone. But now I think back on it and I'm like, well, those are just like pieces of plastic, right? It doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, your childhood is not gone. You don't have fucking amnesia. Like, and that's it, like, what are you gonna do? Go down and like bust out the Furby and like what? Like look at it and just be like, oh man, I had a Furby. Cool.
Yeah, when I was honest with myself about this, I was like, "Oh, okay, the main reason I'm just upset now is because maybe I could have sold some of that for like a few $100 to buy like a mini fridge or some shit."
Yeah. True. Yeah, maybe I'm a psychopath, but I really like, I don't know, like me and my sister, we grabbed the Super Nintendo and the games, and I like busted it open. I looked at some of the old games I had. I didn't have this like dusting off an old tome from the before times. Remember these days? It was so jolly here in the Shire. I was just like, oh yeah, that game. That's cool. Yeah, can we still use this? Like, yeah, we'll bust this
Wait,
out.
you're telling me it wasn't like the big colorful paintings by the Reddit guy? You mean there wasn't like just posters and game cartridges and like a wall?
No,
full
my
of,
mom
like,
would have
shitty
kicked our
merch?
ass if we just had a room that trashed.
Honestly, yeah, like all those not to beat up on our good buddy Rashid too much, but also his shit sucks.
Yeah, we love you, Rashid. Your shit sucks, though.
It sucks in a very interesting way to talk about.
Yeah. You
which
gave
is
us,
probably
you gave us a topic to talk about, so we love
that's
it.
probably the most a lot of artists can hope for. Unfortunately,
I mean, that
But
is
yeah.
art, though. You're spurring discourse. You're making somebody feel some type of way. I never talked about AI art because it's fucking it's pointless.
I'm going to agree that it's a form of art in the way that I think getting tortured is a form of exercise.
Oh yeah. Well, it depends on if they're maybe getting drawn.
The point
and
is,
quartered.
I'm just
All right.
I've been scrolling up and down through those. I don't even want to call them paintings for like
See,
the
you're
last few
obsessed.
minutes.
You're obsessed. You're
It's
nostalgic.
gotten into my head. Oh no. Okay. Well, as if nostalgia inspires melancholy, I only feel rage as I look at these.
Okay.
And I'm just like, okay. See, when I was a kid, my family was actually like pretty well to do. I wouldn't say we were rich, but like I was a bit of a spoiled kid, right? I had the N64, I had the PS1 and
baby.
PS2. I had all the consoles. I had the Game Boy Color. I owned just a shit ton of stuff. But even then, my room was like barren compared to these photos here. I'm like, nobody really has nostalgia for owning that much shit. And I think to the extent they do, it's probably kind of telling, right? Like I think maybe some of the most nostalgic people are just like, oh, I miss when I was like rich back then and I was like a little kid and my parents spoiled me with like a million fucking things and I'd have to work for my paycheck now.
Right. Which I think that shit is fucking weird too. Also, I think part of that is like a conflation between their current neckbeard nest and their nostalgia brain, which is another thing. But yeah, I always thought that shit was really weird when people were like, "Oh man, to be a kid again and not have to do anything and pay bills and live this type of life and all this type of shit." And it's like, listen, I understand how people get into situations and they have to, you end up with a mortgage and a job you hate and shit like that. But it's like, is becoming a child the way that in your mind, is that the way to overcome that? Or are you're kind of mad at something different? It's not living as an adult right now. It's the fact that you can't enjoy yourself with your current lifestyle. And I think that's like kind of a, not to do a we live in the society type of thing, but it is kind of a reflection of that as well, right?
It's a big red flag in people, if you ask me. Like, there's a reason we take the piss out of people who like peaked in high school, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People who are like late into their 20s and 30s and they still think, oh, I'm gonna show my fucking bullies now I'm big and successful,
yeah.
and I make money, and oh, nobody's gonna make fun of me now. And like 20 years later, I thought of the perfect comeback to this one insult that stuck with me since I was like 15. And it's like, that's not okay, dude. You gotta work that out.
Well, yeah. It's also at the like I touched on this earlier, but the people that I know that I used to run with when we were younger in college or whatever, and now they're kind of just like, oh man, remember when we would go out and drink? Remember when we would do things that were enjoyable? Man, those were the days to be young again. It's like, I still do. I don't know about you. I still do that. Like you chose this. You chose this life, man. Like I don't.
I have
don't
more
feel,
of a social life now than I did at any point when I was
sure,
younger.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like
I'm just going through different changes, and like no hate on anybody for getting the mortgage and the kids and shit. Like if that's what you want to do, that's awesome. I fully fucking support you, and also you can do both. And I know people who have that stable home life, and they own a home, and they have kids, they have a wife, all that type of stuff, and then they go out and they party. Sometimes they invite me over, and I'm drinking with them and their wife, and I'm drinking with the kids too. He can have a couple shots, he's fine. Just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that.
We don't advocate for underage drinking.
Yeah, no.
Unless you're really cool.
Unless you're Albanian, and then you have the stomach.
Shout out to our Albanian listeners. Yeah, but to build on this, we were talking about how nostalgia is often tied to this melancholy and feeling like not only was the past better, but it will never be good again. And I feel like that's really like the dark heart of consumerism here, right?
Yeah.
It's like okay, it's this desire to go back to a time where everything was like comfortable, but it's not just your memory of that is colored by how you feel now, because you don't actually want to go back to how you felt back then. You want to go back to the way it was in your memory.
Yeah.
But the thing is, everything that seems like comfortable and cozy and nostalgic now, at some point that was like new and novel, and it might have even been like a little frightening, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of things that I was very wary to get into when I was young that I think are fucking amazing now. But people don't put themselves out there anymore. That's where the toxicity comes from. They don't want to experience new things. They just want to fall back on what was comfortable and familiar and try to relight that old spark, but it's never going to come back.
Well, I think maybe that's why I am not very susceptible to nostalgia in a lot of ways, in that sense at least, because like I remember my childhood being like, I'm not going to say traumatic. I didn't have a traumatic childhood, but I was like a pretty anxious kid. And like I had fun, I had friends, we did cool stuff and shit like that, but like it wasn't just like a carefree time for a child frolicking through the woods. And that,
no, I relate a lot.
Yeah.
Like when I think back, like obviously I have some nice memories of playing the original one or two generations of Pokemon on my Game Boy Color, and I love those games. But if I'm honest with myself, what's my earliest memory of playing those games? It's me sitting in the corner of the classroom on my Game Boy because I was too anxious and weird to talk to other kids.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I had kids over and we like played Nintendo or whatever, but like that's not the shit that I really remember about my youth. It was kind of just like tooling around the neighborhood and just being stupid and just being an asshole and just being weird at school and shit like that. And even that I don't look back on that fine. Like it was fine, but like the idea that there's people who look back on this and it's like that was life and everything since then has just been like a meager existence. That's fucking sad, man. That's sad. And if that's you, I'm not hating on you, but like find a fucking reason to live, man. That's all I have to say. Find a reason to live other than thinking back to like when you used to play Super Mario World with your friends in front of the TV. Like there's better shit to look back on, and there's better shit to look forward to as well.
If there's anything I feel that really colors how much times have changed, and just like the effect of technology and just like mass consumption has had on my own life, I think back to one of my earliest memories where I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I was left to roam the neighborhood with some other kids, like out in the suburbs, and we went full fucking like Grug mode. We went full hunter gatherer, and we would hit up this park like in between a bunch of suburban houses, and there was this chain link fence with like these like blackberries growing on there, and we would forage for fucking berries, and that was my childhood for at least a couple of years before I got a Game Boy.
Yeah, that's cool. So all right, my counterpoint to that one, the one that I did is I lived near I'm not going to dox myself too hard here. I lived in a place where there was some sort of issue environmentally in a nearby suburb, so they kind of cleared it out. So it was like there were still like stop signs and suburban streets and all this type of shit, but like all the houses were demoed a long time ago, but there was still a bunch of like trees and grass and shit there. So but it was near, you know, where everybody's house was. So we used to just take like scrap wood, and everybody would like make tree forts there. But like me and my friends in the neighborhood kids would you'd make your own little spot, and you'd kind of claim your tree. But there was like warring factions of tree fort kids. And it was pretty fun. It was pretty fun. Like, you know, that was cool. I look back on those times fondly, but like also do I look back and say like, God, nothing in life will ever touch those times again, and now I just live a fucking sad and shitty existence of waking up, going to work, and then fucking crying, and then I go to bed. No, absolutely not. And if that's you, I feel for you, but like find your thing now, man. Like you could live a nice time in the past, and you could live a nice time in the future. You could be okay. I promise you. I'm doing it.
That's the thing. Like you kind of just have to let your nostalgia die. You have to not give into it.
Yeah.
You have to seek out new novel things.
Yes.
Although, as poignant as we're being right now, I have to bring this up because while we're telling stories about how things were when we were as a kid, I think one thing I'm most fond of is I think back to playgrounds were different when I was a kid, right? They were much less safe, and I have some very fond memories of like nearly fucking busting my collarbone. No, not collarbone, like my ass. I nearly busted my ass on like these giant like
the tailbone?
seesaws. Yeah, the tailbone, that's what
so
it was.
I heard that's like the
four or
most
five
painful injury you can have is to like bust your your tailbone.
Yeah, I didn't. Thankfully, it didn't happen that badly. But I have memories of playing on the seesaw, and like 4 or 5 kids would like sit on the other side and keep me like 6 feet up in the air, and I'd be like, "Guys, that's not cool." And then they would all get off, and
yeah,
it hurt a lot. But
then
I would do that to somebody else, and that was a lot of fun. Or like, we would have this like fucking merry-go-round that looks like something straight out of like one of the Saw movies, where it was made out of like rusted iron with like the paint chipping off, and it would like squeal like a dying cat whenever you spun it around. And we would get some of the like adults like who were supposed to be supervising us to just like spin the thing as fast as possible. Yeah.
I will delight you with a tale. Is that not too long ago, a matter of a few years maybe, I worked at some after school programs. And all of these things still exist, and they still happen exactly as you remember it. So some things may never die.
That's good to know, because my main reference point for this is my own suburban neighborhood, which I grew up in, and I have since moved out of like 2 or 3 years ago. And most of the playgrounds there are now like, they're all made of like metal and plastic, and they're very bright and colorful, and they're a lot safer. And it's like, I kind of have some fond memories of like everything being made of like this cheap shitty wood that would like splinter uncomfortably,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
the big sheet metal slides that would like burn your hands
Oh
in the
no, they
hot
still
summer's
exist.
day.
They still exist. I'm sorry you have a woke playground, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I liked playgrounds
the
before they went
TradCon
woke.
the TradCon Rusty playground still all over the place.
Yeah, that's why kids nowadays are too soft. We need to keep putting them back through the meat grinder of the cheap shitty
Yeah,
playgrounds
you need
that I grew
yeah,
up
you
with.
need a kid on the on the Rusty merry-go-round just vomiting. Projectile vomiting
For sure.
as they go like 6,000 RPM as like their 19-year-old brother just like is just like spinning them as fast as they possibly can. That's cool.
It's even worse. I've seen a TikTok where somebody would like they would bring up like a fucking motorcycle or something and turn the wheel against the merry-go-round and use like a fucking motor to spin it as fast as possible. I'm like, okay, I would not be here today if somebody did that when I was a kid. But it's funny as fuck.
That is awesome. I don't like spinny things. I like roller coasters and shit like that. I like
they don't make spinny things like they did when I was a kid, back when I had a smaller center of gravity.
Yeah. I'll pass on that shit. I have no nostalgia for just like being dizzy.
Yeah, but I feel like we've made our point on nostalgia, so maybe this is inspired a little bit about us reminiscing about our childhoods. I want to ask, we've talked about how, okay, nostalgia is often colored by these purely imaginary feelings about a past that didn't really exist. But I want to put out there, like, was the past actually better in some ways, or is that all bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, you can have a good past without glorifying it, and most importantly, without devaluing your present or future. And I think that's the only really toxic thing about nostalgia, is this wistful longing for a time that is gone and will never be back. And it's like, yeah, you can look back on the past fondly. That's cool, but like, you're in the present now and you have a future too. So don't piss all over that just because you're thinking about like playing Halo with your buddies when you were 14. Just have fun now and have fun in the future and think about how you can do that.
For sure. When you think back to the past, it's important to not like misattribute like what was actually good about it, right? Like when I think back to me playing fucking Halo 2 on Xbox Live, a lot of that was really fun because it was like my first exposure to online gaming. I was like talking to other people. I was learning new slurs and vulgar words to shout at them. And it's like, okay, that's some fun novelty. But now it's like, if I just log into fucking Overwatch 2 now and somebody calls me like a tranny in the chat, I'm like, okay, that's all you got? It's 2023? You don't have something more spicy? And it's, yeah. But you get where I'm going with this,
yeah.
Right? Like it's important to appreciate things for the way that they actually were. Like a lot of the things I enjoyed most about video games back then was like, things weren't monetized to hell. They weren't shitting out like cheap remakes or like shitty DLCs. And like when you bought a game, it mostly worked. You could just buy it and it worked. And like you don't really see a lot of that anymore nowadays, but it's not totally unheard of either.
Well, so that's also the thing too, is that's another reason that living in nostalgia world is toxic, is to just say like, things were good back then and now they're not. What are you gonna do? Wah, I guess I live in hell world. It's just like, no, we could have the good things about the past now with the good things about the present. But number one, stop buying shitty fucking reboots and remakes of games. Stop consuming like monetized loot box cash shop bullshit. Demand games that were like the ones in the past with the nice things about the future. And if we're just talking about games, there's a ton of indie studios that are totally into that. Stop buying AAA monetized big studio bullshit. And we could have the best of both worlds. And this goes with everything. This goes with music, movies, animation, just media in general. We could have nice things if you just stop being a fucking cuck.
when people say, "Oh, there's no good music being released anymore," yes, there
There
is.
totally
You're just too
is.
much of a you're too much of a coward to go looking
Yeah,
for it.
exactly. You just hear some child post mumble rap and whatever in whatever terrible Discord you're in, just like, oh, everything's bad now. Dude, go back
Truly,
to the
West
fucking
has fallen.
90s. Millions, billions must.
Listen to other music.
Yeah, exactly. Billions must listen to other music, and yeah, just because some child posts some garbage that you don't like, post some shit that doesn't suck. Because there's a ton of people making a lot of really cool shit right now. We live in an unprecedented time of releasing really dope shit, just like this motherfucking podcast. If this was 1994, they wouldn't let us on the air. They wouldn't let us on the air because we're telling them, we're speaking the truth about the Illuminati.
I would get hate crimes.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna
slightly more than nowadays.
Exactly. You're gonna get hate crimed. We're gonna tell them about 9/11. We're gonna tell them the truth about it. The jet fuel can't melt them. But now we can just put this out there, and you could find cool shit just like this podcast all day.
We can
every
talk
day.
about Bigfoot and his big feet, and nobody's gonna be weird about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have that in the 90s.
Exactly. So let legacy media die and stop crying about it. It was cool before. Now it sucks. Move on, motherfucker. Move on.
I'm going to add one more point where you said, "Oh yeah, these toxic people, they just like, oh, things aren't good anymore. I liked it more in the past." And I think it's actually much worse than that, because I think when people go far enough down this rabbit hole, they don't just misattribute what was good about the thing in the past. They get suckered in by like bad faith actors who want to like weaponize their nostalgia to some ill end.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I do think the video game industry is fucking dog shit, and every day I pray that it crashes and burns. But you know what? That's not because oh, they put too many women in games now. Oh, I might see someone who isn't white. It's like, no, that stuff isn't the real problem here. That's sometimes things that we've grown out of in the past are actually good changes.
Exactly. And that's a good point. And you could say that about the music industry, the Hollywood, all sorts of media. And this is going to tie into a topic that we'll introduce down the line, which is dudes with Roman and Greek statue PFPs.
Well, that's a whole thing.
That is a whole thing. But yeah, that's one thing that we can just touch on and talk about more down the line is do not let people weaponize your bullshit fake nostalgia against you, because not only are these weirdos going to do that, but also big studios and stuff like that. They're going to do the same thing, to just be like, remember when Ghostbusters? Well, here we have more Ghostbusters. Please buy. And don't do it.
Don't let people weaponize your nostalgia to have you like hurting other people, and don't let big companies sell you your childhood back to you. Okay, it's
exactly
yours. They will never have it.
That is a very good point. Do not let companies sell your childhood back to you. I really like that one. That's a good quote. That's a good quote.
Yeah, we've strayed far from our initial topic about Disney adults, but I think that seems like a good point to end it on for this week. What do you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think we gave the listeners. God damn it. Fuck.
They're viewing the YouTube video, probably.
We gotta re-record the whole thing. Fuck.
Ah, damn it. Maybe we were right. Maybe the show was better the first time around. Maybe we've lost it.
It's Jover. It's over.
All right. Well, you know what? Tune in next week to maybe get a hit of that feeling you got from our first episode. Obviously, drop a like, a comment, a subscribe, all that stuff. But if you really want to support the show above all else, just share it with other people. Just give them a new novel experience. Just spread it out there. Just plant some seeds, and we'll see where it grows in the future.
Yeah, again, if you get in on the ground floor, and this goes for any listener, you have the chance to like actually be our friends. After a while, it's gonna dry up. It's gonna dry up, but like
just think of this. Yeah. Just think of this podcast as some fucked up little Furby that. Yeah, maybe it's like it's a little scuffed, it's a little ugly right now, but someday it's gonna be worth like at least $600.
Yeah, absolutely. This is this podcast is like crypto. Buy now, instill FOMO in all your friends, and you could be rich. You could have a Lambo, or you could just be a brokey loser. Make your choice. That's it.
Invest in Despair Coin now, and also Despair Coin Classic Edition from the 90s. Only 90s kids will get this.
There's been a fork already. There's a lot of disagreement with the original developers.
Okay, let's leave it off there. Goodbye. Thanks for listening.
Good fight, good night.